maybe different approach
That's a
would
good
be.
one. Let me give you an example. So I'm going to give you an example in my case scenario. So we were a pretty busy pizza shop, right? We opened a second location. And if I could change one thing, I would go back to that second location and I would not duplicate exactly what we did in that first one. I would scale back the menu 50% and
Gotcha.
start really, really small, doing a few things perfectly and then adding over time. Because in my experience, I found that duplicating everything right off the bat in a new location kind of set us back because we didn't have the people who were seasoned enough to really
Yeah.
replicate the first business, and it hurt us in the end. I would have, and it's hard to take things away once you start with
Once
them.
you've
It's
already
much
started,
easier to
yeah.
add something later than it is to take something away. So that's something I wish I would have done. I feel like we would have been a lot more successful if we did it that way. That's just an example from my end.
Yeah, yeah. So I think, I guess in the beginning, I wish I was, and this might sound, I don't know, I guess naive or I don't know, whatever. But in the beginning, I wish I had more of a full understanding of the portion control and like the full like you know breaking down of how much every product costs and like fully keeping an eye on the minute detail of how much money was being spent on product and stuff along those lines. Because I think
That's a good thing. So you wish you were a little bit more aware of what
yeah, because
how things cost and like the percentages of food costs and things like that.
exactly, yeah. You know, and what needed to be brought in, when it needed to be brought in. In the beginning, there was a lot of overstock and understock of certain things. So, you know, obviously that means we are either throwing away money because we're overstocked, or we're losing out on money because we're understocked and we can't serve something.
Right.
Um, so I think that would have been probably something that I wish I would have had more of an understanding about, and I think probably would have made um, the takeoff period of the business a little bit more, a little less turbulent, I should say.
Yeah, it's you got to know your numbers, right? Even though we
Yeah.
talked about earlier in the podcast, like it's hard to like sit there and analyze. There's certain numbers you need to analyze. Food costs, you don't need to necessarily analyze like how many new customers you have, what percentage of online orders you're doing like that. That's important, but it's not
Yeah.
as important as like, all right, you really need to know your food costs because if you don't know your food costs and your percentages, you're gonna have a hard time making a profit because
Absolutely.
you're just buying stuff, and if you're just not priced properly or you're not portioning it properly, you're gonna look back at the end of the month and be like, damn. We did $100,000 in sales, and I got no money. Where
Yeah.
did it all go?
Yeah, yeah, and I actually, so now you've opened up a can of worms. So the other thing I guess I probably would have changed when we first opened, we were kind of under the mindset that like we need to get as many people into the store as possible and kind of take away from the other people because you know, there are four other pizzerias that are very close to us that people have already had a relationship with, that they already have an idea what they're going to get at the end of the day. And we had to try and figure out a way to pluck those guys. You know, we were kind of
Yeah.
bird dogging all of them. Um, so we kind of undershot our menu, which kind of also didn't help the overbuying and underbuying portion of it. So when we came out, our menu items were so underpriced, and it was like mind numbing that we even thought of it doing it that way. And what kind of sucked is that like you can only I'm sorry, I don't know if I can say that.
No, yeah, you're fine.
Um, but what kind of was what kind of held things back was when we started to look at like, all right, now we got to increase our prices, but we can only increase a certain percentage. So even though we increased, we were still so far behind market value because we were so low off the beginning. So
Yeah.
it was kind of like one of those things where it's like, well, if we go from our pie being X and now we jump to Z, they're going to notice and they're going to be unhappy. So we had to like we're still trying to market correct that because like I said when we first opened, we were just like just put this note, like whatever, we just want to get people in the store and we were hoping that we would build volume and we would hope, like things that weren't possibly maybe not realistic in the beginning.
Yeah.
So I think
That's a
that
good
was
one.
something that maybe like that's something that when you open up a business, you obviously want to go and see what the competitors in the area are charging, but don't undershoot your product. If you're confident in your product, then put what you know that it's worth.
Yeah.
Don't
You're
don't
almost
try.
you're almost better off like being the same price or a little higher and then to flood them, just give everybody a free pizza to try you out,
Yeah.
you know, because if they decide that it's good enough, they'll
Then they're
pay
gonna pay.
the price. And like you said, it's hard. If you're like, all right, we're going to start, they're $15 for a large pizza. We're going to be 13. Great.
Yeah.
You got everybody who likes the cheap pizza. But like you said, you can't just a month later be like, all right, now we're 15. They're going to be like, what the hell? You guys
Yeah.
could dupe me kind
What
of.
is going on here? What's this
Yeah.
bait and switch type thing going? You know,
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
people
So
don't want
that's a really, really good point you made there. And that's a good observation for anybody who's
so-
like looking to open a second store or their first one who's listening to this podcast.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I've always had aspirations of opening up a second store. That was always a dream. And now that I'm immersed in it and I'm understanding, I've realized that until I can, like you said, like you opened up your second location and you had this menu that was working perfectly in the first location, so you brought it over to the second spot, and it didn't work as much, and you knew why, because again, like the people, it's hard
Yeah.
to find somebody who can duplicate what you're doing at the level that you want it to be done, and if they're not experienced and you can't get the experience in there, then your product is going to fail just based off the fact that it can't be put together properly.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, if you're a seasoned restaurant, people will give you a second and third shot. But if you're new,
yes,
it's much harder to get somebody to try you a second time if their first experience was not
Well,
great.
Yes, and it's funny because just yesterday I was having a conversation with one of my customers, a very good customer. I don't have conversations like this with I have conversations with all my customers. I don't want to say, but like certain customers, you have more of a relationship, so you open up a little bit more about things that happen. Then they become part of the friendship. That is customers. They always say a customer will become a friend quicker than a friend will become a customer.
That's true.
So it's weird how it works like that. But I was just telling them, like you look at people and they'll go back to McDonald's 100 times, even if 99 times they forgot something or made their food wrong or whatever it is, and like that's just the nature of it. But if I forget a soda or I forget to put cheese on their chicken parm, they're gonna be upset and they might not ever come back, and I don't get that second chance. And that's
Right.
exactly what you said.
Yeah, it's hard.